All right, what up, though? What's happening? Tigers fans, we're back with another episode of the Bleav in Tigers podcast. 2 games into the season, 2 wins under the belts of this 2026 team, and we are on the second episode of the podcast for the season. As always, if you're watching on YouTube form, please like, share the video, subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you're listening on podcast form, thank you so much. Give it a download, give a follow to the podcast, wherever you may be listening. And again, hey, we love to see a podcast after the game that is all hype and no doom and gloom. The Tigers were able to hop out to a 5-2 win. Again, we saw that first inning pounce in the first game. You did not have that at all in this game. The offense really was not cooking really throughout the game. It was just one, really moment you had from Riley Green and Kevin McGonigle that really gave you the game. I mean, outside of that, I think the Tigers ended with 6 hits today. You had 5 runs and 6 hits. You got out hit by this Padres team that had 2 runs today. And I think, again, that's kind of the nature of what Framber Valdez gives you. He's going to give up hits from time to time. He's, again, him and Tarek Skubal are very different pitchers. Again, both lefties, both very elite pitchers. But, that's kind of what Valdez does. He gives up hits, he gives up the ground ball, but he's normally able to work out of that. Only gave up 1 earned run today, had 2 runs in the day. Again, had the error from Dingler on a pickoff. And, I think that's where we're going to start. I want to start with the kind of questionable things first, and then, we're going to get into what is good. Obviously, being undefeated 2 games into the season is a great and wonderful thing that you hope you carry into this road stretch before you see the Cardinals back at home. But, my one question mark I had for the Tigers today, that the fielding wasn't exactly A1. You haven't really had this really elite defensive game yet. And again, I know we're 2 games into the season. I know we're fresh off of spring training. But I think it is something to note. I think when you talk about Javier Baez, that's a guy you look for on defense. I know he's not perfect. I know he kind of overthrows, puts a little bit too much effort in the throw sometimes, and that can cause mistakes. But he also hasn't really given you what you think you should get out of Baez, right? Like, he kind of had that, fumble when they were, going to turn the double play, tap second, lost control of the ball. No review. So, again, the out stood at second base. But again, it just doesn't really feel like Javier Baez. It just, there were too many fielding blunders or almost blunders, mistakes for my chess.com fans, excuse me. I think Javi's just in his head a little. And again, it's not just Javi. Obviously, Dingler had the error. De Jesus really should have gotten to that bag way before he did. Shouldn't have allowed a hit in that inning. It would have erased that infield single. Wasn't marked as an error, so you don't really see that on the stat sheet. And again, that's not a huge mistake. Didn't really end up mattering a whole lot. But, one base runner that late in the game could be really big. Again, not something I'm super worried about. Not something I'm going to ring the alarm on. And we'll talk about ringing the alarm on somebody else here. I'm not ready to say it's an issue. It's just something I've noticed over the past couple of games. The fielding hasn't really been at the level that you want it to be. Also, the Tigers really aren't a fielding heavy team. Gleyber Torres is a solid second baseman. Javier Baez is an above average shortstop, can make a lot of plays that no other players can make. Kevin McGonigle making his MLB debut was really good in spring training. Showed a couple of flashes again today, made a couple of good plays, and then kind of had that infield single where Kevin McGonigle should have had it. So you've kind of had this back and forth with the fielding, and especially in the infield. I don't think it's been as good as it should be, even at the pitcher position too. And I think that's something to watch out for. And talking about, ringing the alarm in the infield, ringing the alarm on fielding, I think a lot of fans are, again, not so ringing the alarm, but, getting close, getting a little worried about where Kerry Carpenter stands. And that's why I'm posing this question. Is it time to ring the alarm on Kerry Carpenter? I'm going to say emphatically no. I wanted to throw the question out there in case anybody disagreed. But again, we're 2 games into the season. Only person really that's, mainly in the lineup that hasn't gotten a hit yet, Riley Green obviously got his first hit today in a very, very, very clutch moment in that inning. But again, Carpenter still hitless, had 3 strikeouts today. Got on base twice. Again, I'm not the type of guy to worry about Kerry Carpenter. There's a reason that he's in the leadoff position. Again, that's kind of a weird position to put Kerry Carpenter in. Again, not gonna tell AJ Hinch how to do his lineups. That guy has a job, and I am a college student, and there's a reason I am not an MLB manager. And he's had that job for a very long time. I think the leadoff hitter has changed a lot in MLB. I don't think it's really an AJ Hinch thing. I just don't think this contact super speed guy is going to be your number one hitter anymore. It's probably going to be the guy that you want to get the most at bats. And before this game, it's going to be Kerry Carpenter. And I think tomorrow in the final game of the series, or not tomorrow. I think they get a day off, right? No. They play Saturday, and then they get a break on Sunday, which is kind of unusual. And then they're back to Arizona for 3-game series to head into April, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, we will be back with an episode tomorrow. And again, I'm not worried about Carpenter, but I can see why some fans, are kind of ready to ring that alarm. Again, 3 strikeouts in a game. Never pretty. That's something you've seen from Riley Green at points in times, and I don't think people worry about Riley Green. So again, I'm saying not to worry about Kerry Carpenter. But now, hey, we got to talk about the good stuff. 7 minutes into the podcast, we are done with all the bad looks today. And we're going to start with the guy that, made his Tiger debut as starting pitcher, and that is Framber Valdez. And Framber Valdez, like I said, he's doing Framber Valdez things. I think his stuff looked pretty good today. I think his curveball looked really good. Left a couple hanging in the zone a little, and I know that was an issue for him last year, but definitely got the swing and miss that you expect to get from Framber Valdez. 11 whiffs on the day, 44% chase percentage, which is ridiculous. By the way, I know some people are not big into, I don't even want to say that's advanced analytics. It's just analytics, and I know some people are not fans of that. So again, not gonna try and ruffle too many feathers there. But 44% chase percentage, I think is very good. And exemplary outing from Framber Valdez. Obviously, it was marked as 2 earned runs. Then they switched that back to a run, saying maybe that run wouldn't have scored. So the final line is 6 innings. Framber Valdez, 7 hits, 1 earned run, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts, 1.5 ERA so far in the year. Only 1 run given up between the 2 starting pitchers in the first 2 games, and I think it's no shock, right? You have Framber Valdez and Tarek Skubal, pumping iron on the mound. That's what you're gonna get, and I think Valdez did Valdez things. Again, the location is always gonna be something to look at, because that was a main part of where Framber Valdez game was lacking last year, especially on the off speed, especially on the curveball, which it's the second most thrown pitch. So it's something you want to be able to locate. It's not just something that he's throwing in as a 5th pitch or something of that matter. It's something he throws a lot, especially to righties. So again, we'll see. We'll see how that progresses. I thought the curveball did look great. He got a lot of swing and miss on the curveball, but there were a couple of times. I don't recall which batters, but where it was left at the top of the zone. But I just think the pitching in general in this game was elite. Obviously, Framber Valdez, former All-Star, is going to be elite. But talk about Enmanuel De Jesus. A guy who's pitching in his 3rd MLB game ever. Again, a super great story. Talked about it on the first episode. Was able to make the 40-man out of spring, and then pushed his way onto the roster, kind of like Kevin McGonigle did behind the plate. He didn't give you a reason to not put him on the roster. Didn't give up a run during spring training. I think he only had 1 walk, 10 strikeouts, something like that was his line during spring training. He looked elite. And besides the fielding blunder, that I mentioned earlier, there was nothing bad about this outing. I think he looked really good. And then, you had Kyle Finnegan. Again, it's great when you have three closer caliber level players in your bullpen. To be able to have the legendary Kenley Jansen, who got his 477 save today, shout out to Kenley, alongside Will Vest, alongside Kyle Finnegan, three guys who are very capable closers, three guys who can do it at the all-star level, three guys who can do it really with anybody else, and you could throw out there in the ninth inning and not be scared. I think this bullpen has a very good potential to be good this year. If Enmanuel De Jesus is the type of pitcher you think he is, and Drew Anderson comes into his own, and you have Will Vest, and you have all of these other players, Brant Herter, another guy who I really like out of that bullpen, this could be a very solid bullpen. And I think that's what makes the Tigers such an elite postseason force. I think when people talk about, way too early October predictions, a lot of people are rocking with the Tigers right now. And what wins in the postseason? It's the bullpen. Okay, and I think this bullpen has the chance to be elite. Enmanuel De Jesus got the win on the day. That Kyle Finnegan splitter, man. I am so happy I am not an MLB hitter. Again, the money is great. I do not want to try and hit a Kyle Finnegan splitter. Got 2 strikeouts in a row. Just absolutely disgusting work. Again, Kenley Jansen looked great too, but I think that was probably the most disgusting pitch of the day. Got that for the second and third outs of the 8th inning. And then Kenley Jansen strikes out the side. Literally, he had one miss of a pitch. Again, he had one ball that was poorly located. Kind of came out the hand weird. Other than that, I think he looked amazing. I think Kenley Jansen was the type of guy that the Tigers hired him to be today. Obviously, striking out the side is not something you're going to do in every outing to get the save. But his first save as a Detroit Tiger, another save in Petco Park, which, he's the leader, in opposing teams, closers in Petco Park. Kenley Jansen has the most out of an opposing player. Obviously, all of the time that he logged with the Dodgers, you're bound to get that. When the Padres honestly weren't that great of a team. But good to see that for him. Good to see the bullpen be elite. But, now we're moving on, talking about the lineup. Kevin McGonigle, man, he's ready for it all. I kind of went on this monologue in the first podcast talking about, man, Kevin McGonigle is special. You don't see 4 hits in a debut very often. And he showed again why he was special today. Again, the stat line for him today: 3 at-bats, 1 hit, 2 RBIs, 1 walk, no strikeouts still in his MLB career. Again, you see that a lot with young guys as soon as they get into the league. But again, as I talked about that Riley Green single, clutch Riley Green single in the top of the 8th to bring the Tigers into a tied position, Kevin McGonigle had what I think is his best at-bat so far of his MLB career. When you think about what it means to be a professional at the plate, something that I think Gleyber Torres does really well is being patient. And by that, I don't just mean, you're going to take the pitches that are balls and you're going to swing the pitches that are strikes. I think what Kevin McGonigle and what Gleyber Torres do so well, and players that, give off this vibe of true professional, very patient players, they swing at pitches too. But you foul off the type of pitches that, are not something you want to look at. And you put your bat into the position, again, to not swing for the fences in every play, but just to get hits. And I think that's what McGonigle did so good. He had a 10-pitch at-bat, was laying off of pitches, had a 2-2 count for a very long time. Low ball, 3-2 count, was able to, again, just poke that bat out there, get it good enough to get into the grass, was able to score 2, give the Tigers a 4-2 lead, and then Dylan Dingler added on to that, scored Riley Green from the previous pitch, 5-2, and that was all the Tigers really needed. It didn't really have much on offense for the rest of the game, but I think Kevin McGonigle's ready for it all, man. I don't think there's any test. Again, we're going to see when he faces, a Cy Young caliber pitcher, seeing how he can do with that, seeing how he can do, with extended series as we get farther into the season. Like, what can he do past this Padres series? What can he do when you're back in Comerica Park, making your home debut? I think there's still a lot of things to be seen, and I'm not very a hot takey type of guy, and I don't really like to do this super early into the season. But I think McGonigle is the type of guy I think he is. That's why some places have him as the number one prospect in baseball, and it is no surprise, right? There's not a lot of guys in the MLB, let alone in the Tigers organization, with the GM like Scott Harris, who, all due respect to Scott Harris, I think he's a very good GM. It's very hard to get up to the MLB as a prospect in this organization. We talked about how hard it was for Justin Henry Malloy to break the MLB, right? It took him a very long time before, Scott Harris thought he was ready. And, he had to get the fielding there. And it was the same thing with Colt Keith. And it's the same thing with a lot of these guys who have made their debut, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Scott Harris is the type of GM to wait. He didn't want to wait with Kevin McGonigle. That's how great he is. That's how much he adds to this team. And again, he's the reason why they won this game. He was a huge part, of the offensive explosion in the first game. And I think he is a irreplaceable piece to this team. We've talked for the last 2 years, almost 3 years even, about getting a third baseman, getting an everyday third baseman. Matt Vierling was great. You never really had a guy who was a day in, day out third baseman. Vierling more of a utility guy. You kind of threw other people there at other points in times. I mean, I think Javier Baez was at third for a small period. Obviously, had Andy Ibanez, lost him to Los Angeles. You have your guy, Kevin McGonigle. I think you have your infield, frankly. I think you have Colt Keith at the DH. You have Gleyber Torres at second. You have Spencer Torkelson at first, Javier Baez at short. If he comes into his own, and again, I think he will, again, very early into the season. I think he can tap in. There's something with Javier Baez. I think he just gets in his head a lot. I think if he can tap in to the type of player that we all know he can be, there's a reason he was an all-star last year. Again, a lot of that is from name recognition, but he stepped into that center field role. He was having fun. When Javier Baez is having fun, he's one of the best players in baseball. One of the best players on this Tigers team. Let me reel that back a little bit. One of the best players on this Tigers team when he's having fun. I think a lot of people talk about how bad Javier Baez Tigers run is. I think it's just a matter of the environment. When you surrounded him with a really good environment last year, a really fun environment, he was able to go out there, be loose at shortstop, be loose at the plate. And I think he's going to have a solid game this year. But, all in all, I think the offense was okay today. Obviously had the big explosion, had 5 runs. Can never be mad with 5 runs in a ball game. But again, they were really shut out. Again, I know, obviously, you see on the stat sheet, you didn't score until the 6th inning. But it didn't, you were having good approaches to at-bats, but you weren't really getting anything out of them. Yeah, but I think this was, again, a great showing of what a fun, young team could be. I'm all ready for Kevin McGonigle. And, we will be back tomorrow, obviously. Jack Flaherty making his 2026 debut as a Tiger. Tigers already took the series, but looking for a sweep against Randy Vasquez. Had a 3.84 ERA last year in the regular season, career ERA of 4. 27-year-old making the start for the Padres. And again, we will be back after that game. I think the Tigers looked exceptional today. I think Framber Valdez was very good. Again, it gave up 2 runs. One of them was earned. Bullpen was absolutely elite. Kevin McGonigle is elite. Gleyber Torres had 3 walks on the day, scored 2 times. Again, another guy that was instrumental to the success. I think Kevin McGonigle and Gleyber Torres are in for a very, very, very big season. Not going to make any more comments on that. Wanted to throw something in our hot take. You're not going to do it. But thank you for listening to this episode, wherever you are. YouTube, podcast form. Give us a follow, subscribe, a like, a dislike if you feel like it, or a comment telling us what we can do better. And we will be back tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening.